Imagine two doors in front of you. Behind door one is a path to financial freedom, where money multiplies while you sleep and wealth builds automatically year after year. Behind door two is a prison cell where you work harder every year but fall further behind, trapped by payments that never end. Both doors are labeled the same thing: debt. The cruel twist is that most people walk through the wrong door convinced they made the right choice. They borrow for the wrong things. They avoid borrowing for the right things. They spend their lives paying for the past instead of investing in the future. I am about to show you exactly how to identify which door is which, so you never accidentally walk into the prison. Debt might be the most misunderstood concept in personal finance. Mention the word and people divide into two camps. Camp 1 fears debt entirely, treating it like poison that must be avoided at all costs. Camp 2 embraces debt carelessly, financing everything from phones to furniture to vacations, convinced that monthly payments are just how modern life works. Both camps are wrong. Both approaches guarantee financial mediocrity or worse. The truth lives in the uncomfortable middle ground, where debt is neither hero nor villain, but a powerful tool that amplifies whatever you point it toward. Point it toward assets, and it accelerates your wealth. Point it toward liabilities, and it accelerates your poverty. Master this distinction, and you hold the key to financial transformation. Ignore it, and you will either stay broke avoiding leverage entirely or go broke using leverage incorrectly. Hit subscribe and smash that like button, because understanding what I am about to share separates the financially free from the financially trapped. This is not theory. This is the operating manual for building wealth strategically. Let me paint a clear picture of bad debt first, because you need to recognize the prison door before you can avoid it. Bad debt finances consumption. It pays for things that decrease in value over time while the payments drain your income month after month. The item depreciates. The debt remains. You get poorer from both directions simultaneously. Car loans represent the most common bad debt trap in America. The average new car loses 20% of its value the moment you drive it off the lot. Within 5 years, that $40,000 vehicle is worth maybe $15,000. But you financed it for 6 years at 7% interest. Your total payments exceed $48,000. You paid $48,000 for something now worth $15,000. The math is devastating. Meanwhile, that monthly payment of $650 could have been invested. Over those 6 years in an index fund averaging 10% returns, that same money grows to over $55,000. The car buyer ends up with a $15,000 depreciating asset. The investor ends up with $55,000 in appreciating assets. Same income, same time period, different doors. Credit card debt is bad debt amplified to an extreme. Interest rates averaging 22% in 2026 mean that balances compound against you with terrifying speed. A $5,000 credit card balance making minimum payments takes over 15 years to pay off and costs over $8,000 in interest alone. You paid $13,000 for $5,000 worth of purchases you probably cannot even remember making. Furniture financing seems harmless. 0% interest for 24 months. But studies show people spend more when financing than paying cash. The psychological pain of payment is removed. The couch you would never buy for $3,000 cash suddenly seems reasonable at $125 monthly. Then life happens. You miss the promotional period. Interest backdates to the original purchase. That couch now costs $4,000 for a couch. Vacation financing has exploded in popularity. Travel now, pay later. The experience ends, the photos fade, the memories blur, but the payments continue for years. You are paying for the past instead of investing in the future. Every dollar going toward that vacation debt is a dollar that cannot compound for your benefit. Phone financing normalizes bad debt for an entire generation. $40 monthly seems invisible, but over 2 years that is nearly $1,000 for a device worth $200 by the time you own it outright. Then you upgrade and restart the cycle. Permanent payments for perpetually depreciating technology. The pattern is clear. Bad debt finances. Things that lose value while the payments drain your income. You get poorer from the depreciation. You get poorer from the payments. You get poorer from the opportunity cost of what that money could have become if invested instead. Now let me show you the other door, the one most people never walk through because they were taught to fear all debt equally. Good debt finances assets that increase in value or generate income that exceeds the cost of borrowing. The asset appreciates or produces cash flow. The debt costs less than the returns generated. You get wealthier from both directions simultaneously. Real estate investment represents the classic good debt scenario. You purchase a rental property for $200,000, putting $40,000 down and financing $160,000 at 7% interest. Your monthly mortgage payment is approximately $1,065. You rent the property for $1,800 monthly. After expenses, you net $400 monthly in cash flow. But here is where leverage works magic. The property appreciates 3% annually, which is conservative for most markets. That is $6,000 in equity gained. Your tenants pay down your mortgage, adding another $4,000 in equity annually. Your cash flow adds another $4,800. Total first-year return is approximately $14,800. Your initial investment was $40,000. That is a 37% return on your money. Without leverage, buying the property outright for $200,000, your return would be around 7%. Leverage multiplied your returns by 5 times. This is the power of good debt. The asset generates returns exceeding the cost of borrowing. The gap between those numbers is accelerated wealth building. Business debt follows similar principles when used strategically. Borrowing $50,000 at 8% interest to purchase equipment that generates $100,000 in additional annual revenue is mathematically obvious. You pay $4,000 yearly in interest. You gain $100,000 in revenue. The spread is $96,000 in your favor. Small business owners who understand leverage expand faster than those who refuse to borrow. They purchase inventory that sells at profit. They buy equipment that increases production. They invest in marketing that generates customers worth more than the advertising cost. Each dollar borrowed returns multiple dollars in value. Education debt occupies complicated territory. It can be good debt or terrible debt depending entirely on what you study and how you apply it. Borrowing $80,000 for a medical degree that leads to a $200,000 salary represents good debt. The increased earning power far exceeds the borrowing cost over a career spanning decades. Borrowing $80,000 for a degree with limited market value and $40,000 salary potential represents bad debt disguised as investment. The earning premium never justifies the borrowing cost. The payments burden you for decades while providing minimal return. Before taking education debt, calculate the realistic salary increase the degree provides. Compare lifetime earnings with and without the degree. Subtract total borrowing costs including interest. If the math is strongly positive, proceed. If marginal or negative, reconsider. Mortgage debt for primary residence sits in the middle ground. Your home is technically an asset, but it generates no income while you live in it. It costs money through taxes, insurance, and maintenance. Appreciation is possible but not guaranteed. You cannot easily access the equity without selling or borrowing against it. However, mortgage debt is typically low interest. Tax advantages exist through deduction of interest payments. Building equity provides forced savings. Compared to renting, the math often favors ownership over long-time horizons, especially with fixed-rate mortgages that lock in payments while rents increase annually. The key distinction is buying an appropriate house for your income. A reasonably sized home with a payment under 28% of gross income represents acceptable debt. A luxury home stretching you to 40% of income becomes bad debt masquerading as asset building. The debt quality depends entirely on the terms and proportion of your finances consumed. Now let me give you the framework for evaluating any debt decision so you never accidentally walk through the wrong door. Ask the return question first. Will this debt acquire something that increases in value or generates income? If the answer is no, you are looking at bad debt regardless of how the financing is marketed. 0% interest on a depreciating item is still bad debt. The interest rate does not transform consumption into investment. Calculate the spread second. What does the debt cost annually in interest? What does the asset return annually in appreciation or income? If returns exceed costs, you have potentially good debt. If costs exceed returns, you have bad debt with extra steps. The spread must be meaningfully positive to justify the risk of leverage. Evaluate the risk third. Leverage amplifies everything, including losses. That rental property generating 37% returns could also generate 37% losses if vacancies spike or property values decline. Good debt is only good when things go according to plan. Have contingencies for when they do not. Consider the opportunity cost fourth. Even good debt has alternatives. That $40,000 down payment for a rental property could be invested in index funds with zero effort required. Historically, stocks return approximately 10% annually. Your leveraged real estate must beat that return on a risk-adjusted basis to justify the additional complexity and commitment. Check the terms fifth. Interest rate matters enormously. A rental property generating 8% returns is good debt at 5% interest and bad debt at 10% interest. The same leverage opportunity transforms from wealth building to wealth destroying based solely on borrowing costs. Let me share some practical strategies for using good debt effectively while protecting yourself from getting burned. Maintain substantial reserves before leveraging. Leverage requires cushion. Things go wrong. Tenants miss rent. Equipment breaks, revenue dips unexpectedly. Without reserves, a leveraged position becomes a forced sale at the worst possible moment. Keep 6 months of payments minimum in liquid reserves for any leveraged asset. Start small and learn. Your first rental property should not be a 12-unit apartment complex financed to the maximum. Buy a single-family home or duplex. Learn property management. Understand the reality versus the spreadsheet projections. Scale up after proving competence with smaller leverage amounts. Lock in fixed rates when possible. Variable rate debt introduces uncertainty that can transform good debt into bad debt overnight. A rental property cash flowing nicely at 6% interest becomes a disaster at 10%. Fixed rates provide predictability essential for leveraged positions. Avoid cross-collateralization. Do not let one leveraged asset endanger another. Structure deals so that failure in one investment does not cascade into losing everything. Wealthy investors use separate LLCs and non-recourse financing to contain risk. Maintain escape routes. Before entering any leveraged position, know exactly how you will exit if things deteriorate. Can you sell the asset quickly? Can you refinance under different terms? Can you survive a period of negative cash flow? Never leverage into a position you cannot escape from. Let me address the psychological dimension because math alone does not determine outcomes. Your emotional relationship with debt matters. Some people are wired for leverage. They sleep soundly with debt knowing the math works in their favor. They separate emotion from calculation. They view debt as a tool no different than any other business implement. Other people are wired against leverage. Debt creates anxiety regardless of the math. They lie awake worried about payments even when cash flow is strong. The psychological cost exceeds any financial benefit. Know yourself honestly. If leverage keeps you up at night, the returns must be dramatically higher to justify the mental taxation. Sometimes the mathematically optimal choice is not the personally optimal choice. Wealth built with misery is not actually wealth. The wealthy have mastered debt as a tool rather than viewing it morally. They borrow to invest. They leverage to accelerate. They use other people's money to multiply returns. They would rather control $1 million in assets with $200,000 invested than own $200,000 outright. But they also respect leverage. They maintain margins of safety. They prepare for downturns. They never leverage to the point where one mistake means total destruction. Aggressive but not reckless defines their approach. You have 2 doors in front of you labeled identically. One leads to freedom. One leads to prison. The labels will not help you choose correctly. Only understanding the fundamental distinction between debt that builds wealth and debt that destroys it will guide you through the right door. Borrow to acquire assets that appreciate or generate income exceeding borrowing costs. This is good debt. This is leverage working for you. This is acceleration toward financial freedom. Never borrow to finance consumption of things that decrease in value while payments drain your income. This is bad debt. This is leverage working against you. This is acceleration toward financial prison. The tool is identical. The outcomes are opposite. The difference is entirely in how you choose to use it. If this video transformed how you think about debt, subscribe, because I break down the strategies that separate the wealthy from everyone else. Drop a comment telling me about your experience with good debt or bad debt. Share this with someone still confused about which door to walk through. Two doors, same label, completely different destinations. Now you know which one leads to freedom. I will see you in the next video.